This notion of sensory clarity as a vehicle for insight and liberation. We don't have any historical record of this before the Buddha. Although he said there were Buddhas in the past, etc., etc. Basically, the idea is you take the sense of self and you break it down into components. Now, there's a lot of ways you can go about this. The four great elements, the four foundations of mindfulness, the five aggregates. There's a lot of possibilities, a lot of ways that the pie can be chopped up. If you're more on the, scripturally oriented side, you're very concerned with the particular sets of categories that are used to untangle the web of limited identity. But for me, I'm not so concerned with the categories themselves as the general idea. I think it's one of the most significant discoveries of our human species. A parallel discovery took place in the West, and in fact is one of the things responsible for the domination of Western culture. But in the West, the principle of separate the strands and you can understand how the thing works and gain a handle on it, that principle was never applied internally, but it was applied externally to the external natural world in many, many domains, starting with the Greeks. And the Greeks gave us a word for that process. It is the Greek word that means to break something up in order to understand it and be empowered. Analysis. Analysis now implies some sort of intellectual formulation. I'm going to analyze the situation. But originally, the word analysis meant exactly what those morphemes mean. It meant take the complicated thing, break it down into its pieces, see how the pieces interact with each other, and you'll understand how the complicated thing works. It's divide and conquer. Stratagemma de divide et impera. The strategy of if you can untangle, if you can find out what the fundamental dimensions of the system, what are the primes, what are the atoms, what are the components that are involved in this system, then you're going to get a handle on it. The West eventually discovered that the whole natural world could be analyzed in terms of mass, length, time, thermodynamic temperature, and electrical current. Their interactions will give a complete understanding of the natural world, at least as known to modern physics. But it took centuries and centuries and centuries of contention, argument, confusion, to finally be able to define these components of the natural world. But it allowed for the arising of physics, and physics allowed for better ships and better cannons and better machines, and that allowed for the domination of Europe over the rest of the world. So the West used divide and conquer in order to conquer the material world. But in the East, the Buddha discovered divide and conquer in order to conquer our limited identity, in order to conquer our suffering and the screwed up behaviors that come from our suffering. He was called a conqueror. Some people don't like the divide and conquer. They think the conquer is bad. But actually, one of the words that was used to describe the Buddha was Jina, J-I-N-A, and that means the conqueror. Because when he was born, the court astrologer was called in by his father, King Shuddhodana. The Buddha was born in the Kshatriya caste, which is the warrior caste of India. And the king asked the court astrologer, what do you foresee for my son Siddhartha? The astrologer said, Your Majesty, you've given birth to an extraordinary child. He will either stay in the palace and conquer India, which for them meant conquer the world, Jambudvipa, meaning expand your empire from being a little clan up in northeast India to, like, you're running the show now. Or he will leave this palace and conquer himself, conquer his limited identity, and make his mark in history that way. His father wanted him to conquer the world, and so tried to keep him inside the palace. So this notion of, if you want the more gentle formulation, untangle and be free. If you want the more sharp formulation, divide and conquer. This is sensory clarity, the third component of mindfulness. And as far as I mentioned, as far as I can tell, this was like a unique discovery and was central to the development of a whole new direction in human spirituality. These are skills. Concentration, sensory clarity, equanimity are skills. They can be developed with time.